May Jesus and Mary be loved by all hearts. As I said in our introduction to this series on Garabandal, I've asked my friend Kathy Miller to help me unpack this extremely rich apparition series, which is gaining ever-increasing attention as the day of the prophesied warning and miracle get closer.
Conchita has to announce the miracle, and she's 72. But sister, we'll be doing other videos on the warning and the miracle.
Yes, today Kathy is going to make the case that the Garabandal apparition series is the most Eucharistic of all the modern Marian apparitions.
I asked sister if we could do this talk early in our series because naturally the Eucharist is on our minds, given the U.S. Bishop's call for a 3-year Eucharistic revival.
It's not like Mass and Holy Communion aren't mentioned in other Marian apparitions, but Our Lady was usually emphasizing just one particular aspect, like reparation.
I hope you all are tuned into Sister's YouTube playlist on apparitions because she points out so many details.
Well, as a Carmelite, I had a lot of time to meditate.
But when it comes to Garabandal, the emphasis on the Eucharist was pervasive, personal, and prophetic. Do you agree?
Yes, Kathy, Garabandal has a strong and rich Eucharistic theme. So what shall we start with?
Let's start with the first apparition.
Oh yes, the girls were playing marbles when a beautiful angel stood before them. He was silent, and they were startled in awe.
After he disappeared, they hurriedly ran toward the church, as if the encounter had made them want to continue feeling close to God. The schoolmistress met them there. "My children, have you really seen an angel?" "Sí, Señora." "Could this be your imagination?" "No, Señora, we have really seen an angel." The schoolmistress believed them and said, "Let's go inside and pray to Jesus in front of the Blessed Sacrament in thanksgiving."
The angel later identified himself as Saint Michael.
He did not speak that first time. He came a few days later with the sign at his feet.
It was in Latin, as if it was a solemn proclamation like an encyclical.
The Roman numerals piqued the girls' curiosity. Our Lady would interpret it for them a few weeks later. The text on that sign had some words before the Roman numerals, which were 18,1961. The visionaries learned that it was the day and year in which the first formal message of Garabandal would be released. It included the phrase, "We must visit the Blessed Sacrament frequently."
So, in that first message, we are told that it's not enough to pray at work or home, but there is something very powerful about praying in the presence of the Eucharistic Jesus.
Yes, and Garabandal is permeated with the importance of the Eucharist. The next lesson is the importance of frequent communion. For the next 3 weeks, St. Michael taught the girls with unconsecrated hosts how to receive communion devoutly. And yes, the girls were ages 10 and 11 and had made their first communion already, but it was not common for people to receive communion often. Most villagers only received twice a year.
That sounds shocking, and it is, but despite the efforts of popes since Pius X, an air of Jansenism still pervaded the minds of many Catholics in every country. They felt that communion was for special occasions, and they had to go to confession right before, and they felt they had to prepare days or weeks in advance. I remember as a young sister feeling astonished when older nuns would reminisce about this attitude that was prevalent in their childhood.
From the notes of Father Valentin, it seems that St. Michael began giving them communion with consecrated hosts on July 11th.
July 11th wasn't the feast of St. Benedict back then. On the 1961 calendar, it was the feast of several obscure martyrs of the 4th century, like Pope Pius I and James, the Bishop of Eusebius. So the point is that it wasn't about receiving Holy Communion on a special occasion. The girls began receiving communion every day.
Before that remote village became famous, daily Mass and communion was not feasible. It was high in the mountains and the road was barely a road. A priest came only on Sundays and holy days of obligation. It was a very big deal for this angel to bring them daily communion.
Just a few weeks ago, an Oklahoma priest jarred the congregation by deliberately misquoting the Our Father in a homily. He said, "Give us this day our weekly bread." Yes, we need the daily bread, the bread of the strong, for our growth in holiness and for our personal struggle against temptation.
Father Valentin called them mystical or mysterious communions. The host and the angel were invisible to onlookers, but they were very real to the girls. and the villagers could see them extend their tongues and swallow.
The communions were never casual. The angel told the girls the day before so that they would be reflecting in advance and to thank God afterwards. St. Teresa of Avila similarly exhorted her Carmelite nuns to reflect on the immense grace of Holy Communion at bedtime.
They had to follow the protocol of their day. They were to fast for 3 hours. The fast from midnight had already been reduced by Pius XII, and then recite the Confiteor. St. Michael stood before them and said, "This is the Lamb of God," and so on, to which the girls responded, "Lord, I am not worthy," and so on. St. Michael gave the visionaries communion. He instructed them to give thanks to God, and then he told them that they should always recite the Anima Christi prayer, and he had to teach that to them.
Did the villagers believe?
Most were deeply impressed, but a certain priest expressed concern that angels cannot consecrate. The girls asked St. Michael where he got the consecrated hosts, and he replied, "From tabernacles on earth."
That's what theologians speculated about the Fatima angel who brought the host to Lucia, and where did he get the chalice with the precious blood? I don't think even the Eastern rites reserve consecrated wine.
The angel must have filled his heavenly chalice right from an altar during Mass.
Good answer, Kathy.
The Blessed Mother told the girls that if they saw an angel and a priest at the same time, they should greet the priest first, because he was ordained to consecrate Jesus Christ in his hands, something the angel could not do. Our Lady also impressed on the girls that it was a greater grace to receive Jesus in the Eucharist than to see her in an apparition.
We'll do a separate video on the priesthood, which is naturally an extension of the Eucharistic theme at Garabandal.
Besides the church, there is another location where countless apparitions and communions took place. The villagers called the spot the Pines.
Kathy was telling me that for the villagers, the Pines was a holy place.
One year, well before the apparitions, the occasion of the first communion of 9 children was commemorated by planting 9 pines up the slope of Mount Ormazzo. It's about a 10 or 15-minute walk from the village. This became a landmark because it's the first thing you see when approaching the village coming up the road from Cosio. It's not clear whose idea it was, but Father Angel Casio Bélez and the mayor, Conchita's paternal grandfather, Serafin Gonzalez, were involved. The trees were planted by 9 first communicants with a festive air and the composition of song verses.
Who would imagine that when the trees reached maturity, they would serve as a backdrop for so many visits of Our Lady?
I forgot to mention, regarding those mystical daily communions, the first time it happened was at the Pines. On July 11th, the angel asked the 4 girls not to eat in the morning and to take a friend to the Pines, perhaps as a witness. There he appeared with a goblet made of gold. He told them that he was going to give them Holy Communion, this time with consecrated hosts. They were to recite the Confiteor and think of God.
Jacinta once received a hard lesson about the need to be properly disposed for Holy Communion. Kathy, tell us that story.
Jacinta, Loli, and Conchita were called by St. Michael to receive communion. Everything began as usual with the first girl receiving the host. Jacinta, who was next, raised her head, opened her mouth, and held out her tongue, but the angel passed her by. Noticing this, her eyes welled up with tears. The angel asked, did she not remember the argument she had had with her mother? He reminded her of what the Virgin told her so many times, that Jacinta had to make more effort to conquer that fault, her lack of submission, her way of speaking disrespectfully. He said that she could not receive the Lord in such a state. When she returned home, her mom noticed her sorrow and asked what had happened. Her eyes filling with tears, Jacinta said, the angel didn't want to give me communion because of an argument I had with you, one that I can't remember. The mother could not remember either.
That gives me goosebumps. Dear Lord, how many times do I prepare for confession and I don't remember certain faults because I didn't stop to think at the time that I had offended God?
I'd like to mention another incident that stressed the Eucharist. A pharmacist and his family from Barcelona visited Garabandal to give thanks for the cure of a family member. This gentleman showed Conchita a woman's compact, the kind for makeup powder, and wanted her to offer it to the Virgin to kiss. Our Lady was kissing medals and religious items, which people kept as precious souvenirs, but Conchita explained that the Virgin didn't kiss non-religious items. Nevertheless, the compact was laid down on the table with rosaries and other objects put there for the Virgin to kiss. Conchita soon fell into ecstasy. Right away, she picked up the compact and lifted it up for the Virgin to kiss. It scandalized the people. Don Ramon Pifarré explained to the onlookers that the compact was a holy object. During the Spanish Communist Revolution from 1936 to 39, Father E. Bayonne, who was later assassinated by the communists, was chaplain of a convent of Carmelite nuns, which was across from his house.
Oh, I wonder if that was in Madrid, where the young Saint Maravillas was hiding a lot of sisters.
I don't know, but his testimony, he said that it became impossible for the chaplain to offer Mass in the nuns' chapel, so he celebrated Mass in a house nearby. When it got to the point that it was too dangerous to celebrate Mass anywhere in the city, the priest came to the pharmacist's house and asked if they had something in which he could place some consecrated hosts. Ramon's wife offered a brand new compact that had never been used. Then they had the happiness of having the Blessed Sacrament in their home. At the next ecstasy, the Virgin affirmed for Conchita, they kept it as a relic, and more than a relic.
Another lesson from Our Lady about the real presence of Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament.
The first of the two main messages of Garabandal was delivered October 18, 1961. Thousands of people trekked to the village in pouring rain and expected to see the sun spin as at Fatima or something spectacular.
Recall that in 1917, the spinning sun stopped the downpour and dried everyone's clothes.
Like the girls had said, nothing ended up happening like that in 1961. The rain never stopped, though. Our Lady said to read the message twice. But the commission established by the bishops had intervened, and the message had to be read only at the Pines and not also by the church. At 10 p.m., finally, it was read out loud by a layman because the voices of the young girls didn't carry. It was a short but strong warning to convert. It disappointed the restless, wet, and irritable crowd who had persevered in anticipation of seeing something.
We'll focus on that in a later video.
After that fiasco in October, the visionaries desperately pleaded with Our Lady for a miracle that would help the witnesses believe that the apparitions were really from heaven.
That seems so stupid to ask for signs. Hundreds of ecstasies were fantastic signs. If you look at the old movie reels and photographs, the girls couldn't possibly walk backward over stones or fall back gracefully with their clothes modestly arranged.
I can attest to that, sister, having been there. The following June 22nd, St. Michael told Conchita that God would provide a miracle through her and him. The host would be visible on her tongue. Conchita hadn't reflected that other people couldn't see the host. Nevertheless, she thought this would be a small miracle.
Not so the villagers or Conchita's mother, who harbored hesitations. Conchita tried to tell her mom about the milagruku, that's what they called the little miracle, but Aniceta, how do you say it? Aniceta wouldn't listen until Conchita said, "The Virgin told me to tell you." Kathy, please read the quote here.
When Conchita said, "The host will become visible the day I receive Holy Communion," her mother replied, "Aye, and you say that this is a little miracle? This is the greatest miracle there is, the Eucharist." Conchita replied, "Then after this miracle, will you believe in the apparitions?" "Yes, yes, completely. Even if the Pope himself tells me it was not true, it was just a phenomenon or something like that, I'll accept what the Holy Father says, but inside, I'll always believe you received communion from the hands of an angel."
So on July 2nd, a voice told Conchita that the miracle would be Wednesday, July 18th. This is 1962 now.
Conchita hastily wrote many short letters to notify people of the upcoming miracle, even asking Dr. Ortiz, the investigator from the diocese, to come be a witness.
At least one attorney came, but it isn't clear if he was formally on the commission or not. Okay.
On July 14th, 20,000 people started showing up at this tiny village to see the Milagruku, the little miracle, and also to enjoy the celebrations in honor of Saint Sebastian.
The titular feast of the chapel and village was back in January, but it was moved to summer for better weather for the procession and the special dance in his honor.
Imagine the scene in 1965. 1,000 vehicles brought people from a distance, some very far distances, to the area, but there was no real road up to the village. Only a dozen light bulbs existed in the whole village. There was no electricity. There were no bathrooms except in one tiny tavern which stayed open all night but only could hold a dozen people.
And nothing for the handicapped on those dangerous, steep, and stony paths. People were sleeping on doorsteps, in haystacks, in kitchens, in the middle of the street, and the little piazza in front of the church.
On July 18th, 3 priests celebrated 3 masses, a Franciscan, a Jesuit, and a Dominican named Father Tovino, who had observed the miracle directly. At each mass, the priest had to break hosts into many little pieces for the unanticipated numbers of people.
After the main mass, the St. Sebastian procession took place with dancers in costume.
People were waiting all day to be told to gather to see the Milagrucu, but nobody reflected that Conchita received communion at one of the masses. In those days, 1 communion per day was the limit.
The church had to regulate these things because of abuses in early centuries. There was a group going to Mass every hour to receive communion 12 times a day. I think that was like in the 400s. So you never know what people will do.
But daily communion itself was a bit of a novelty in that remote village, so people might not have even known about the regulation.
But the angel never gave communion when a priest offered Mass.
But the miracle was promised by Our Lady to happen on the 18th. So that probably should have trumped every other consideration.
I suppose. But St. Michael was going to respect church regulations.
Our Lady believed in obedience. The day dragged on. Secular dancing was going on in the field right next to where people were praying, which caused a lot of tension.
Conchita prayed 2 rosaries, insisting that the 3 priests join her in prayer, asking that the dancing would stop.
At 10 p.m., Conchita received the first call.
At midnight, she had not yet heard a second call, and since July 18th had now ended, people started leaving, believing that there would be no miracle.
But at 1:30 a.m., the dance finally ended.
1:45 a.m., Conchita fell to her knees. She was in her house now, and then she rose up and went down the steep stairs while looking upwards all the time at her vision.
Conchita's brother, Miguel, followed her. He and Pepe Diaz each took one arm. They each had flashlights. They turned 2 corners. She fell suddenly to her knees. Since no one expected the miracle to happen in this spot, the crowd rushed past in the darkness.
Alejandro Damians, a man with a movie camera that he had never used, was pushed close. We'll come back to him.
An angel appeared to Conchita, not an angel, the angel, appeared to Conchita in front of the barn of one house, like the stable at Bethlehem. It was a humble place for a miracle. Dirty water was often thrown out of the window right onto the spot.
He said, "Pray the Confiteor and think of whom you are going to receive, and then keep your tongue extended with the host until the Virgin arrives."
People saw the host begin to appear as a little dot, which grew in size. Some say like a spiral, others say it sprouted on her tongue, growing larger, about 2 millimeters thick, they estimated.
The host was white and thicker than usual. It appeared to be kind of spongy in texture. It remained on her tongue for a few minutes.
Witnesses testified that there was nothing in her mouth before the host appeared.
Then the Virgin appeared and said sadly to Conchita, "Still, not everyone believes."
The little miracle was over. It was now about 1:50 a.m., July 19th, 1962.
So 4 persons had observed the Milagruco directly, and 30 people signed a statement affirming that the miracle happened.
A man who had not been to confession in 27 years said that seeing the miracle changed his life.
Everyone who witnessed it experienced changes in their lives.
Conchita wrote a story in her diary about a Franciscan priest, Father Justo, who was present for the little miracle and saw it but did not believe it.
Read it for us, Kathy.
Father Justo told others that he had not witnessed it, that it was a lie. A few days later, he sent a letter to Conchita in which he explained that he had fallen down and was trampled on by the crowd, and by the time he managed to get to his feet, the host was already on her tongue. He said, "The devil tempted me, and I came to think evil." and after some sleepless nights, I have come to think more serenely, and now I am once again sure that it is God who gives you his protection. He came back to Garabandal about a month later to talk with Conchita privately. He went into ecstasy and towards...
she went into ecstasy.
She went into ecstasy and towards the end fell to her knees in the same exact spot as she had been when receiving the visible host. Turning to Father Justo, she offered the crucifix to kiss. She held the cross to my lips for a long time and never offered it to anyone else. The next day, Father Justo spoke with Conchita and explained why he had denied the little miracle. Her mother then answered all of his doubts.
Two men met a year after the Milagruku to compare notes regarding the filming of this event. The first man, a businessman named Alejandro Damians, whom we mentioned, was the one who filmed the miracle with a borrowed movie camera that he had never used before and never adjusted when he began filming. At seeing the host on Conchita's tongue, he felt a joy so intense, so profound, so exceptional for which he would give his life, he said, that he could only go off into a corner and sob in silence.
The other man, Dr. Jean Coe, was a very successful and flamboyant plastic surgeon and an amateur photographer. He brought his camera equipment, including lighting, and was quite ready to use it, but everything went wrong, and he wasn't able to film a thing. Only in the last fraction of a second did he even manage to see the host as it was swallowed. At that moment, he was pierced with a terrible pain that overwhelmed him and lasted a long time. It was only then that he had the thought that he was in a state of mortal sin. He began weeping. I understood what hell and sin were at that point. I learned the hell of not seeing God. Later, while in ecstasy, Conchita held the crucifix up 3 times in a row for Dr. Coe to kiss.
So let's conclude by emphasizing that Garabandal increased people's devotion to the Holy Eucharist.
Conchita's mother started walking to Cosio and back, about a 7-mile trip, to attend daily Mass and receive the Eucharist.
Conchita's aunt, Maximina, wrote in a letter to a family in Barcelona that the frequent communions of the girls made a great impact on the villagers, who only communicated once or twice a year, as we said.
It definitely intensified Conchita's devotion to the Eucharist.
Mother Nieves at the Burgos school reported, quote, Conchita's Eucharistic devotion was a vigorous practice without sentimentality. And I can say that she had to overcome darkness and dryness on many occasions. Conchita would kneel in the school chapel as close to the tabernacle as possible, even at 11 at night on the eve of her 18th birthday when all her classmates were sleeping.
That devotion has been lifelong. She promoted adoration of the Blessed Sacrament in the U.S. and has maintained contact with Father Justo, who promotes perpetual adoration throughout the world. Fellow Fatima pilgrims of Conchita's report that she finds a way to be as close as possible to the monstrous when it is in procession on Thursdays at Fatima.
While discussing the relics that Conchita possessed while she was in Fatima, because she had a residence there, the priest she was with said, Conchita, you are a living relic. She immediately responded, yes, I am a living relic because every day I receive Jesus in Holy Communion. Conchita wrote, think that you are entering into the Holy of Holies, the temple of the living God. That is what the Eucharist is.
Let's return to the first apparition of the angel with the sign and Latin letters.
It referred to the first formal message to be given a few months later, October 18th, 1961, and this message included the phrase, we must visit the Blessed Sacrament frequently.
And don't forget the second formal message on June 18th, 1965 at 10 p.m., given by St. Michael. Less and less importance is being given to the Eucharist.
I want to remind people that Jesus is present in the tabernacle, even if there is no formal exposition going on. When I was a child, churches were open all day, and it was common for city Catholics to drop in for a visit.
I think adoration chapels began as an extension of daily Mass chapels because large churches were being vandalized or parishes didn't want to air condition or heat the big church.
Adoration hours are definitely a new and beautiful phenomenon. It would mean a lot to Jesus if you would sign up or try to get that going in your parish.
On November 13, 1965, Our Lady appeared for the last time at Garabandal. Conchita was the only visionary, and she went to the Pines with many items for the Blessed Virgin Mary to kiss. Our Lady said, "Conchita, I have not come for you alone. I have come for all my children. And you should visit my son in the tabernacle more often. Why do you let yourself be carried away by slothfulness so as not to visit him? He waits for you day and night."
In October of 1968, Mr. and Mrs. Robert Froelich asked Conchita what she thought the main emphasis as given by Our Lady at Garabandal. Conchita said, "Devotion to the Blessed Sacrament and prayer for priests."
It can't be disputed, sister, that Garabandal was a Eucharistic apparition.
Amen. Now, we're proposing some questions for reflection, and we invite you to think about them or add comments in the channel. So our questions are, number 1, did the angel bring communion so frequently to convey the importance of daily communion?
And did the angels bringing the Eucharist to the seers when there were no priests in Garabandal foreshadow the changes after Vatican II, which established extraordinary ministers of the Holy Communion to give communion to the sick or during a communion service in the absence of a priest?
With the Holy Eucharist being such an integral part of Garabandal, what might it have to do with the prophesied events? Stay tuned for more of these little chats because this is a big apparition to unpack. God bless you, and thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, sister.